Private members' business. Order of the day number 1, Family Law Amendment, a step towards a safer family law system, Bill 2020, resumption of debate on the second reading.
The question is that this bill be now read a second time, and I call the Honourable Member for Fowler.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I've spent the last 2 years stuck in the Federal Circuit Court trying to protect myself and my children from the violence perpetuated against us by my former husband. I have directly experienced the incompetence of the court due to its focus on the presumption of joint parental rights. It keeps overruling without reviewing any evidence of the family violence orders that have been made by the Magistrates Court and has put in place to protect our safety. Deputy Speaker, they're the words of Carissa Vita, a domestic violence survivor. I think she succinctly puts in perspective the inadequacies of the current family law framework. This is an issue, the one at the forefront of Women's Legal Service Australia, that notes that up to 85% of family court matters involve domestic violence, and goes on to say the presumption of equal shared parental responsibility shifts the focus away from child safety, placing children at risk from further abuse. And I'd like to thank the member for Moreton for his bill and his continued advocacy in this space. It was only earlier this year that our nation was rocked to the core by the tragic and senseless murder of Helen Clark and her 3 children. Before Helen Clark's murder, the Women's Legal Service teamed up with Rosie Batty to establish the first Safety First family law plan. One of the first initiatives in the 5-step program was removing the presumption of equally shared parental responsibility as found in Section 61DA of the Family Law Act. This was a campaign which was started only in October last year, with the call for action reignited in the immediate aftermath of the tragic death of Hannah Clark and her children. Unfortunately, it's now been 8 months since the tragedy, and the call to action remains that, simply the call. It's been a failed commitment to reform the family law system so that it's safer for women and children. The presumption of equal shared parental responsibility is often misinterpreted by the community and practitioners, I might add, as equal time, a misconception that is harmful to women and children. This misconception often plays a large influence in parents who are negotiating consent agreements, with women who've experienced family violence and who cannot access or afford proper legal representation, are often persuaded to believe that equal sharing is the only option under the law. This misconception can further give an abusive partner the incentive to litigate parenting disputes. This often has the effect of increasing the litigation costs and time while perpetuating further abuse. Deputy Speaker, moreover, while there are 2 exceptions to the equally shared parental responsibility under the Family Law Act, covering abuse and family violence, these exceptions have been less than effective in real practice. Shiona Moore, the Director of Policy at the Federation of the Community of Legal Centres Victoria, highlights this when she says, "In too many cases, children are being forced to maintain a relationship with a violent parent due to the presumption of shared responsibility." This view is also reinforced by the research conducted by the Australian Institute of Family Studies in 2010, which found that when family violence and child abuse is made as an allegation, more than 75% of the cases result in orders of equally shared parental responsibility. However, when the allegation is only in respect to family violence, almost 80% of cases result in equal shared parental responsibility. It is clear that the current framework is not working effectively and is only likely to worsen, in my opinion, if the Family Court is merged with the Federal Circuit Court. We owe it to Hannah Clark and her children and the countless other women and their children who have been murdered or forced to endure a terrible ordeal at the hands of abusive partners to change this system. We must always act to ensure the best interest of the child is always paramount consideration in these circumstances. In the words of Laura Boss, the chair of Small Steps for Hannah, and I quote, "What we have seen with Hannah Clark and her babies is the gaming of the custody system, and it's one where nobody wins in the worst possible ways."
I thank the honourable member for Fowler. The question is that this bill be now read a second time, and I call the honourable member for Bass.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Some of the earliest meetings I had after my election to the seat of Bass last year was with family law experts and practitioners about their concerns with a range of issues, including the safety of the family court premises in Launceston, an issue which I'm pleased to say the Attorney-General has worked with me to resolve. From those discussions and from the countless conversations with constituents caught up in the family law system, I have concerns that the system is not working as intended across a wide range of areas. Not least, there can be confusion and misunderstanding of the legislation and how it is applied, leading to unnecessary distress for those engaged in the system and not serving anyone particularly well. What we're here to discuss today is one section of the legislation that has been cited as problematic. Section 61DA provides for a presumption of equal shared parental responsibility when making parenting orders. Although the presumption in 61DA does not apply when there has been family violence or child abuse, it is evidently clear from consultations with experts in this area and from what I have learned from those who have gone through the system that this exception is not always easily applied. And there are, of course, wider considerations about the best interests of children in particular. In preparation to speak today, I sought the opinion of, amongst others, Women's Legal Service Tasmania, who daily are negotiating the adequacy of the law in protecting children and have concerns that the equal shared parenting presumption is inconsistent with the United Nations Conventions on the Rights of the Child. These international law protections include the right of the child to be heard in all matters and decisions affecting them, the right of the child to have their best interests assessed based on their own needs, and the right of the child to have their legal rights respected. Yvette from Women's Legal Service Tasmania tells me, "We fail to prioritise the child's needs above the rights of parents when we talk about equal shared parenting rights. The very term insinuates that the rights of parents override the rights of the child. This is a very traditional and old-fashioned view of being a parent and belongs in the era when children were seen and not heard. This does not accord with contemporary best practice. Often the system, and the courts in particular, fail to ask children what they want to happen. Blindly applying any principle like ESP is dangerous. It fails to take into account the personal attributes of each and every child. All people and children are unique and have their own needs. This requires an individual assessment particular to each and every child before the court, free from the application of the imposition of the rights of others and free from the imposition of the will of other parties, including either parent." The Family Law Practitioners Association of Tasmania stopped short of recommending repeal, but agrees that there needs to be further clarity around these sections, which from my discussions with the Attorney-General, I understand that the government is open to exploring. So often we are failing those we need to protect the most. Sadly, these sections of the Act are just one piece of a complex issue, with a lot of moving parts. How do we enable families to separate in the easiest, most equitable and least stressful way for all parties, especially children? And more broadly, how do we create true social, economic and cultural change that finally moves the dial on family violence? I am not yet convinced that repealing this one section of the legislation will fix the challenging issues in this area or is necessarily the best approach, and I'm very mindful that it could have perverse outcomes. We need wider structural, social and cultural reform, and this cannot be viewed in isolation. I understand and I share the member for Moreton's passion to see change, and I note that he and I are both currently engaged in separate inquiries into both family law and domestic family and sexual violence. It is my belief that the outcomes of those inquiries should inform a way forward, and I don't believe it would be wise to preempt their recommendations with a single proposed change. But this issue is one of those that has been raised often, and we should remain open-minded about it. There is a great deal of divergent views on what is a highly emotive issue, and I thank those that have reached out to share their experiences with me on all sides of this discussion. I believe more could be done to assist and educate people negotiating the family law system, and I do think it is important to be able to discuss these matters openly in this place and to find the common ground and be constructive. There should be bipartisanship in these matters in the best interests of all Australians, particularly our children. And I look forward to continuing to discuss these issues and to work together for a better future for Australian families.
I thank the honourable member for Bass, and I call the honourable member for Newcastle.
And thank you, Deputy Speaker. I'm very pleased to rise in support of this private member's bill. The Family Law Amendment, a step towards a safer family law system bill of 2020. And I'd like to thank my colleague, the member for Moreton, who joins us in the chamber today, for tabling this bill and for his long-standing advocacy in this area. This bill would remove the presumption of equal shared parental responsibility from the Family Law Act, ensuring that children's interests are given priority and placed at the very centre of family law custody decisions. When I asked the Law Council of Australia for their priority reforms during a recent public hearing of an inquiry into family, domestic and sexual violence, they didn't hesitate to name this as their #1 priority for law reform. The review was backed in by a number of witnesses, including frontline organisations who are working every day to combat this scourge of violence, family and domestic violence. One woman is killed in Australia by a current or former partner every single week. Already in 2020, 40 women have been killed by violence. And we know that the post-separation period is one of the most dangerous, not just for women facing domestic violence, but also for their children. In 2016, the presumption of equal shared parental responsibility in parenting orders was first introduced in amendments to the Family Law Act. Regretfully, it has been causing great confusion and damaging custody decisions ever since. In 2017, I was the Deputy Chair of the Social Policy and Legal Affairs Committee inquiry into a better family law system to support and protect those affected by family violence. Evidence came before us then, in 2017, that there were great inadequacies in how the current presumption of equal shared parenting is operating. Even though there are exemptions available for families experiencing violence, these exemptions are very rarely exercised. Indeed, there was substantial evidence to suggest that the presumption was in fact contributing to inappropriate, sometimes damaging and outright dangerous post-separation parental arrangements. When the Australian Institute of Family Studies looked into this and found that even where both family violence and child abuse had been alleged in a case before the court, over 75% of these cases led to orders for equal shared parental responsibility, either by a judge or consent by parties. This cannot possibly be in the best interests of the child, which is why the committee then recommended the removal of this legal presumption 3 years ago. There are too many cases where parenting orders made under the presumption of equal parenting responsibility have placed children in the custody of abusing parents. And when you consider that half of the matters before the Family Court of Australia and 70% of those before the Federal Circuit Court of Australia involve allegations of family violence, this is no small matter. But it is not just formal court decisions. The principle also sets a precedent for all decisions that are negotiated between the parties outside of courts. Importantly, this bill has widespread support of community and legal groups, those who have direct experience in the operations of the family law system. Amongst the most prominent has been the Safety First in Family Law campaign that Women's Services Australia launched with Rosie Batty. This campaign has secured the support of more than 90 organisations. So many of the things we know we must do in order to drive down the scourge of domestic violence are going to be resource intensive and expensive. We need adequate funding for frontline services so that no women seeking advice and support is unable to find it. We need to properly fund emergency and longer-term housing options so no women and children fleeing violence are not left with nowhere to go. But changing the presumption of equal shared parental responsibility costs nothing as a budget line item, and yet it has the potential to prevent so much damage. If we're going to drive down the rates of domestic violence, we must place the safety of children at the very centre of our family law system. So this important change has widespread support. But despite this, it will go nowhere in this place without bipartisan support. And that's why I sincerely thank the member for Bass. in her public support and in her contribution to this debate today. I urge all government members, those colleagues of good heart and good conscience in this place, to support this bill. You know it's the right thing to do. Let's not wait for more women and children to die before we act. We can and must do better than that.
I thank the honourable member for Newcastle. The question is that this bill be now read a second time, and I call the honourable member for Cowley.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I would like to also add my voice in thanking the member for Moreton for tabling this very important bill that removes the presumption of equal shared parental responsibility. As the member for Newcastle explained, this provision in the Family Law Act was first introduced in 2016, and we've heard evidence of the damaging aspects of this, supported by empirical evidence, supported by research, and indeed supported by a number of inquiries conducted through the Parliament into the family law system. So many inquiries, in fact, Deputy Speaker, and yet no change, no real reform has been brought into the family law system. The current family law inquiry has heard further evidence brought to us by witnesses who have experiences with the family court, and particularly those who have been impacted by this provision in the current Family Law Act of equal shared parental responsibility. As the member for Newcastle mentioned, the bill does have widespread support among practitioners in family law, among people who provide services in domestic and family violence, and indeed among the public as well. Deputy Speaker, I think I've spoken before about my own experiences with domestic violence and with the family law system. That was many, many years ago, and sitting now on this family law inquiry, this current family law inquiry, I am astounded at the fact that 20 to 30 years on, the substantive issues with the system that I experienced all those years ago persist. That there has been no real structural reform within our family law system, particularly to address issues of family and domestic violence. And the provision for equal shared parental responsibility, as members before me have rightly pointed out, do not work in the best interests of the child. We have example after example after example where this provision has placed children in harm's way with a partner or a parent who is violent or who has perpetrated acts of violence and abuse towards the partner. The provision is also used by parties in a family law dispute as a weapon against each other. Very simply, that's what it's used for. We already have an adversarial family law system. We already have an adversarial law system. Adding further measures within the Family Law Act that enable parties in a dispute, in a family law dispute of all things, where emotions are high, where tensions are high, where people come to the system feeling broken, feeling defeated, only serves to create more of an adversarial system, and that can never be in the best interests of the child. In approaching reforms to family law, the interests of the child must be foremost in our minds. Legal experts, service providers, those who are at the coalface, and even those who have experienced the family law system agree on this point, that the children must be first. It must always be at the fore of our minds. I can see no logical reason why a presumption of equal shared parental responsibility puts the best interests of the child first. I can see no reason why that happens. In fact, it is counterproductive and detrimental in cases of family and domestic violence. As the member for Newcastle pointed out, the figures of domestic violence, the number of women and children who are killed by family and domestic violence in Australia is staggering. It is staggering. We are at crisis point in this country. We should, as members of Parliament here, be doing everything that we possibly can to address this scourge within our society. Removing the presumption of equal shared parental responsibility would go some way to doing that, because it would put the best interests of the child first, but it would also address those substantive structural measures that currently exist within the Family Law Act that allow it to continue.
I thank the honourable member for Cowan. The time allotted for this debate has expired. The debate is adjourned and the resumption of the debate will be made in order of the day for the next sitting.